Hey everybody, how's it going? Hope you're having a good Monday. It's going to be time to start in on our next lesson here about adding and subtracting mixed numbers for fractions. We're going to get all into it today and get a good introduction, a couple good problems to start us off. I'm going to do some visual stuff as well. With this lesson, we're kind of putting together everything we've learned so far as estimating at first to get us on the right track and know where we should end up. Making some equivalent fractions with common denominators to allow us to add and subtract, and then putting those answers into simplest form. So it's kind of, again, putting all the previous work we've done together into these not super challenge, not exactly more challenging problems, but just a little bit different. When we have these mixed numbers, we're going to look at a couple of things about what that is. So a mixed number is when we have an example of a whole number and a fraction together. So in this case, like we'll see here, 1 4/5 would be a whole 1, and then fraction 4/5, 2 1/10 the same way, 2 wholes and then 1/10 as a fraction. So it's a mix of whole numbers and fractions, and that's all that is. They work much the same with regular addition and subtraction, so I don't think it'll be too much of a problem, but just to get us into it, let's just have that as our introduction. Let's go ahead and start up here. We're on page 383, and we're just going to walk through a few of these examples. I'm going to do a little visual along with that as well down here to help us kind of see what's going on with what it means to have 2 1/10 or 1 4/5. But real simple example here, we have Denise mixing up some paint. She's got blue paint and yellow paint, and she's going to make green. That's why we see green here, right? Know your primary colors. Blue and yellow make green. So we have 1 4/5 ounces of blue paint, 2 1/10 ounces of yellow paint. How many ounces of paint did she mix? In this case, we would be adding, and what we're going to do here is we're going to add 1 4/5 plus 2 1/10. Now, step one here is going to be to estimate. And so before we do that, I'm going to take these pieces of our fractions here, and I'm going to make these into a little visual part. Okay, so we're going to add these. Yeah, this is our big task, to add 1 4/5 and 2 1/10. So let's first go through, and I'm going to over here do a little visual model of that so we can see what that really looks like, and then that'll help us kind of refer back to our estimating, how we can tell, is it closer to 1, is it closer to a half, is it closer to none. Let's go ahead and look at that. Now let's see, we said blue paint is 1 4/5. Let's start off with blue here. 1 4/5, here's my 1 4/5 represented. This would be 1 whole, so 1, and then 4/5 would be 4 out of 5 parts. So it would be like this, 4/5, okay? Now, if I was going to, again, estimate that amount, I would say, well, I've got 1 whole, and then we would say 4/5. Is that closer to half or 1 or 0? That's almost another whole part. So what I would round this to is actually just go ahead and make that into, round that to 2. 1 whole part plus almost another whole part would make 2. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in here to start us off. I'm going to say the 2 for blue. And then we'll add the other piece as well. 2 1/10 for the yellow paint. Let's go ahead and do that in yellow, of course, when we fill that in with our colors. So here this would represent 2 whole parts, 1, 2 whole parts. And then here are my tenths, and if I just have one of those tenths, you can see that that's not very much. So again, if we're going to estimate this, we would probably want to say that this 1/10 is closest. Is that closest to 0, 1/2, or 1 whole? Well, it's definitely not close to 1 whole. 1/2 would be like if we had all of these filled in as well, which we don't, right? We only have 1 of the 10. So this 1/10 is actually closer to 0, so we can almost just like ignore it as far as estimating goes and just say, well, it's mostly like I have 2 holes and then nothing else, almost nothing else. So I'm just going to go ahead and call that, keep that at 2. So 2 whole parts, and then almost like we're dropping off the fraction. Hopefully this will show up pretty good. Yellow doesn't show up all the time. So we have basically our estimation would be we're going to have 2 plus 2, which of course that'll equal 4 as our estimated answer. We'll go and make that green since we are making green paint. Okay, so we think our answer is going to be close to 4. So again, that's a good way to start things off. Now let's go ahead and look at what we need to do as far as adding these. So we're going to see these. A good way to do these is to stack them. So step 2 says find a common denominator. Use the common denominator to write equivalent fractions with like denominators. Now, if I look at this, I can actually get from fifths to tenths. So I can actually keep my 2 1/10 the way it is. I can keep that as 2 1/10. Okay, so I'm going to actually keep that one like that because that can be our common denominator. We can have tenths be our common denominator. So then that means, okay, we need to take our 4/5 and make those into tenths. We're gonna keep that one whole. We still have the one whole. And then we got to think, how many tenths is that going to be? Okay. Now, like we worked on in the past, and like you did last week when we were actually adding, we would think, okay, I'm going from 5 to 10, so I multiply by 2. So I need to do the same thing with my numerator. So 4 times 2 would give me 8. So that's going to make this our new numerator that's equal. So now we have amounts that we can add. 8 tenths plus 1/10 we can add up. Now, again, just to show you the visual part of that, basically, if I take my fifths and make them into tenths to match up here, I would kind of just draw lines in each section. And you can kind of see, again, we start off with 4/5. I'm not changing how much stuff I have. I'm just sort of showing it in a different way. If I go like this, now I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 parts there, which again, equivalent fractions here. So we're seeing how to do it with some multiplication skills. And again, we can also have that visual if it needs us. I think that helps us out. So now we're able to add these up. So, okay, step 3, and again, this is like our biggie for the day. Step 3 is add the fractions and then add the whole numbers and then write your answer in simplest form. So if I'm going to add the fraction parts, I have tenths plus tenths. And so I'm going to keep those as tenths, right? So our denominator stays the same. I'll make this a little bigger. Tenths here. And 8 tenths plus 1/10, of course, we add our numerators, and that's going to give us 9 tenths. And then the whole parts, don't forget that. 1 plus 2 is, of course, 3. So we get an answer of 3 and 9 tenths here. And so Denise mixed 3 and 9 tenths ounces of paint. So again, don't forget your estimated answer is about 4. So that means, okay, I'm feeling pretty good about this answer. 9 tenths is almost a whole nother part, which would make it 3 and 9 tenths would round up to 4. So we know we're pretty close there. Okay. So again, if we want to go ahead and put it into the visual, we can say we got 1, 2, 3 whole parts here. So if I add 3, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then 9. So again, just to do it visually, we would end up with 9 tenths here. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9. Awesome. Okay, so there we go. That's how we can start this off. Again, mixed numbers is just the same as regular adding fractions. We need to have a common denominator to be able to add, and then we just have to remember those whole parts, right? So we've got 3 whole parts and then 9 tenths left over. And in this case, that would be in simplest form. We can't make those fraction numbers any smaller. So this would be our answer, 3 and 9 tenths. Okay, great. Okay, let's go to our next page where we're going to see a subtraction problem. Go on page 384. Again, we're going to use a common denominator. Wait, no, we're here. Okay, we're up at this example. We're example, so we're going to take 4 and 5/6 minus 2 and 3/4. Now with this one, we're going to estimate an answer as well. We can estimate the difference. Let's just do that without a visual. But 4 and 5/6, think 5 out of 6 is almost all of those 6. So let's just go ahead and call that about 5. 4 whole parts plus almost another whole part would be like 5. Oh, let's just go ahead and do it here. 5 minus 2 and 3/4. 3/4 we could call 2 and 1/2, or we could just make it easy and say that's a round up to 3. 3/4 is right in the middle. So I'm going to round this up to 2 whole parts plus another 1 whole part would be about 3. Now again, you might estimate differently, but as long as we're using the good rounding skills, we're going to be okay. So we're going to expect our answer to be close to 2. Okay. Now with both of these, we need to find a common denominator for the fraction. The whole parts stay the same. So 4 and 5/6, we can almost keep that whole part. 2 and 3/4, we can keep the whole part. Okay. Now let's think about common denominators. Now again, I'm going to choose to use 12ths. 6 and 4, if we talk about the multiples we could list, we could go 6, 12, 18 for the 6's. If we're going by 4s, we would go 4, 8, 12, 16. Then we'd see, okay, I got 12 is my common denominator. In this case, that is our least common denominator. You could use 24ths, but then you might have to simplify your answer. But let's go ahead and use 12ths for this example. Okay. All right. So let's go back to that. So if we're going to use 12ths, let's again this is what we've been working on. 12ths here, 12ths here. And let's think, how do I get there, right? So 4 and 5/6, we're going to focus in on the 5/6 part. If I go from 6 to 12, I would multiply by 2. So then I have to do the same up top. So I'm gonna change my color here so we can see. 5 times 2 would be 10 twelfths. Okay. Then the other one, 4 from fourths to twelfths. 4 times 3 would make 12. So I got to do the same up top. 3 times 3 would make 9. So I got 9 there. Okay. Now again, remember we are subtracting to find our answer here. So now we're going to subtract the fraction. We're going to step 3. Subtract the fractions. We want to start with that 10 twelfths minus 9 twelfths. Just leave us with 1 12th. And 4 minus 2 whole parts would give us 2 whole parts. So this is going to be our answer here, 2 and 1 12th. So again, big thing there is, of course, remember to pay attention to whether you're subtracting or adding. In this case, we're finding the difference by subtraction. Okay, so there's that. We get 2 and 1 12th. Not too bad, right? Just look. So far, we haven't had to put anything in simplest form because we're already in simplest form as it is. But always check for that at the end. Okay, so let's go ahead and do this. So what you have for today's work is to do numbers 1 through 7, which is 384, and then on to page 385. So up here, 5, 6, and 7, and stop there. So here you're going to be subtracting. Let's see if we can do maybe one of these together. Let's go back to 384. 7 and 2 fifths plus 4 and 3 fourths. After you pick up the pattern, it's not too bad. If we're going to round this, I might say about 7 and 1/2. For estimating, 7 and 1/2 plus 5. So my estimated answer is about 12 and 1/2. That's a terrible 2. That's okay. We're just doing a quick one. So we're going to keep these whole numbers here. So 7 and 4 are going to stay the same, but then we have to change our fractions to make equivalent fractions with common denominators. So if we have 4 and 5, we would have to multiply those together to get 20ths. 20ths. Okay. 5, again, go through that process, right? Finding that common denominator is 20, and then to make the equivalent fraction, I have to do the same thing with my numerator that I do with my denominator to get there. 5 times 4 would make 20, so 2 times 4 would give me 8 20ths. That's equal to 2 fifths. Then down here, 4 times 5 would make 20, so I have to multiply 3 times 5 to make 15. Okay. Now this is going to be a good one to talk about, because now when we add up, we're going to have to do a little bit of work to get our answer into the simplest form. This is where I wanted to actually get to and cover, so we'll get there. We're going to add the fraction bits, and so notice this, when I add this up, 15 plus 8 would make 23 20ths, okay? We'll have to clean that up in a minute. Run out of room. 23 20ths. And then 7 plus 4 make 11, okay? So I have 11 and 23 20ths. So to put this in simplest form, now last week we kind of talked about a little bit at the end of the lesson how this fraction piece is called an improper fraction. We want our fraction numerator to be smaller than the denominator. In this case, it's more, okay? So what do I do with that? Well, let's talk about that. 23 20ths, I'm going to focus in on just that part. I'm going to bring it over here. 23 20ths we can rewrite as a whole number with a fraction with it, okay? So if we think about kind of working our way backwards and talking about the addition that can come from it, let's do that. We can say, color change, if I think about taking out a whole part, we have more than one whole. We have more than 20 20ths. So if we think of 20 20ths being equal to one whole, I can kind of think of that as like a 1. And then to kind of make like a backwards math sentence, I would still have, if I have 20 20ths, to make 23, I'd have 3 20ths. We can kind of start by slow, we'll eventually get this to where we can do this in our heads. But if I take 20 20ths out, that's equal to 1 whole. And then I'd have 3 20ths left. So the way, if we had 23 20ths by itself, we would want to put that into simplest form by saying that's like 1 and 3 20ths. So I take 20 20ths as one whole I can take out and rewrite as a mixed number. Now again, we've got our 23 20ths here along with the 11 20ths. So since we know that that's equal to 1 and 3 20ths, we can write this as 11 plus the 1 would make 12 for the whole part. And then again, 3 20ths left over. So this is our answer for number 1 here. Okay, so be on the lookout for that and try it out. I'll look in my next video. I'll review these other ones. If that happens, we'll talk about how to handle that. But go ahead and you guys we just done number 1 together. Rewatch this part if you need to. Then you've got 2, 3, 4 more addition, and then the other parts for subtracting. So just make sure you do that. Estimate find those equivalent fractions. Don't forget the full parts. I'll see you in the next video. Thanks so much, guys.